Hello and welcome to Spectrum Vision Partners Management and Position Training for Equal Employment Opportunity, Discrimination, Harassment, and Retaliation Prevention in the Workplace. I'm Lindsay Ziegler, the Director of Human Resources for Spectrum Vision Partners. Thank you for attending today. So why are we here? We have a duty as a company and as management to maintain a safe and comfortable environment for our employees that's in line with our patient service mission. But also, this is the right thing to do for our employees as an employer. Management has an important role as our frontline risk management. We as a company have to provide our management and physicians with the proper training so that you're aware of what's expected of you and so that you have the tools to do your job. I want to stress HR and legal are responsible for completing all investigations. Managers should not and cannot complete internal investigations. Preventing harassment starts with understanding our policy and a commitment to supporting it. Managers are responsible for monitoring behavior and reporting any inappropriate behavior or employee complaints to the HR department. Again, managers are not to conduct their own investigations. Once you're aware of a situation, you are obligated to report to Human Resources.
So the question is certain behavior considered unlawful or inappropriate? And on this slide, we have a couple of pearls related to guiding principles. The most important element on this slide is to report. Be active in reporting any concerns that may be directed to you or that you may witness directed towards others about inappropriate behavior. We are committed to basically the ABCs, which is an acronym for appropriate business conduct. And really, this is about creating an environment that's mutually respectful. Our commitment to our staff is not something that we take lightly. As an organization that is committed to service and creating a positive team environment, we understand that the value of a staff that feels supported and appreciated is beyond measure. Providing a workplace that promotes mutual respect is a very basic step that we are committed to taking in showing support and appreciation for those of you with a critical responsibility to delivering our product, which at its core is just patient service. So while this is important for creating the right environment for our staff, it's also important for a number of other reasons. The environment that is seen as mutually respectful serves Spectrum's best interest and the interest of its related clinical entities for a number of reasons. One critically important reason is risk management, right? So where do plaintiffs generally come from as it relates to employer-employee related relationships? It's generally from those individuals that through the course of their employment have felt disrespected, treated unfairly, or treated with an insensitivity. So as an organization, obviously avoiding those kinds of situations is important to us. So it's really a culture of mutual respect is in everybody's interest. So why this presentation? Well, on some level, it's legally required in many jurisdictions, but even beyond that, it just makes good business sense. A couple of bullet points here on why the presentation is important. I kind of like to refer to these as really the triple Ds of risk management. Damages, right? So if we are faced with administrative charges or lawsuits, there's typically some economic consequence there. Distractions, right? So if we're engaged in defending an administrative charge or preparing to defend a lawsuit, that takes us off the primary purpose or the mission of the organization. It's a loss of focus. And then defections, right? So if we're in a situation where we're being confronted with claims of discrimination or retaliation, it's bad PR in the market, which will trigger a loss of patients. Also bad morale, which triggers a loss of staff. And finding good staff is never easy. So we want to make sure that we take all reasonable steps to avoid that. So in summary, the policies of Spectrum Vision Partners and the related clinical entities prohibit discrimination on the basis of protected characteristics, prohibit sexual harassment, prohibit any protected characteristic-based harassment, and prohibit retaliation. The policies explain how to report complaints, policies explain how complaints are investigated, and really, you know, part of our commitment to taking this whole effort seriously. Just one additional word on retaliation. Retaliation can take many forms, and our policy on that is a zero tolerance policy, and you want to be mindful of the different manners in which retaliation can occur. It can occur in a progressive discipline context where the discipline is triggered by an interest to retaliate against an employee, negative reviews, disfavorable treatment when it comes to raises. It could also take more passive forms, right? Trying to find out who was the, initiator of a complaint, or allowing, freezing somebody out from the group dynamic. So there's some passive ways that retaliation can occur. There's some more traditionally perceived ways in which retaliation can occur. Essentially, none of those behaviors are tolerated by Spectrum or the related entities. So equal employment opportunity. Quick quiz, short question. So we have Joe, good-looking guy in the picture, right? 27-year-old Caucasian male. Question is he in a protected class? Some of you might think yes. Some of you might think no. Some maybe really aren't paying attention, but the other options maybe, or I don't know. And really in this case, what's compelling is that you cannot judge protected class just on the surface. There's really not enough information here to know if Joe is a member of a protected class or not. You don't have any information about religion, disability, real or perceived, veteran status, sexual orientation, or unrelated criminal activity. One thing about protected characteristics, it's a pretty lengthy list. That list varies by jurisdiction, so it's a little different at the federal level, a little different across each state, and even municipalities like New York City have expanded the definition of protected characteristics. So a couple of ones that most people are more commonly familiar with: age, race, religion, color, national origin, sex or gender. Then as that's been expanded through legislation and judicial action, it includes topics and characteristics such as sexual orientation, veteran status, gender identity, pregnancy, disability, marital status, domestic violence, citizenship or alienage, genetic predisposition, criminal history, especially in the case of unrelated prior offenses. And by unrelated, I mean unrelated to the task and duties associated with the position, or engaging in protected activity, which is going to be an area that probably becomes more contested as we work through this decriminalization of marijuana and have to reconcile how that plays into account with prohibitions of working under the influence, right? So it's outside of the workforce. Individuals have the right to engage in otherwise legal or protected activity, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we can't regulate certain behaviors as an employer. So just a minute detail that's, I guess a little timely and topical. Really, list is important, but again, as long as we're committed to facilitating a work environment that's based upon mutual respect, this list becomes a little less important because people are treated equally and become valued for their diversity and contribution to the mission as opposed to any one of those characteristics. We talked a little bit about the expansion of that list, and there's some of the New York City distinctions. Really, what equal employment opportunity means is that individuals should get equal treatment, right? When making decisions related to an employment, it should be based upon qualifications, skills, and abilities, not at all driven by whether or not they're, classified in one way or another. Protected characteristics should not be considered and will not be considered. The one area that, carves out a possible exception for that would be with accommodations, right? So we have freedom of religion And as an employer, we take that right of employees very seriously. We work to fashion reasonable accommodations, disability, pregnancy, two other areas where, as an employer, we are actively engaged and actively committed to providing reasonable accommodations where required. So where do these laws, the equal opportunity employment laws, come into play? Well, it's really all aspects of the employment relationship, from the moment that somebody is interviewed and hired, right through the separation and ending of any employment relationship. So, work assignment schedules, performance reviews, promotions, raises, disciplinary action, really all areas of the employer-employee relationship. So, really, most important thing to take away from this segment of the presentation, if there's an issue, we want to hear about it. Again, report issues that you feel you've been targeted, during, or if you see something occurring to a coworker and you just feel is not fair, reach out. There are multiple mechanisms for reporting these concerns. You can go to a doctor, you can go to your direct supervisor, you can go to the HR department, and as Chief Operating Officer for the organization, certainly my door is open for those. It's everyone's responsibility to make this contribution and to actively support these policies. And as issues are reported, they are taken seriously. A couple of key points to keep in mind is that reasonable attempts will be made to keep identity of individuals sharing concerns, the identity of individuals that are interviewed during an investigation. Reasonable steps are made to keep, to not disclose their identity. At some level, though, that's hard to keep, but it's pretty confident that in speaking with, the reported perpetrator of any harassment, that it's not generally on their need to know, but maybe elsewhere in the organization, such as a recommendation is being reviewed and a decision is made, that information may be shared. Also keep in mind, right, that there is very strict commitment to the policy of non-retaliation. And these responsibilities are not just higher administration responsibilities, but the responsibilities of each and every supervisor or management level employee. And really, again, as we went back to the prior slide, it's got to be a commitment that everybody participates with, that everybody takes seriously, if we're going to be successful in preventing harassment, discrimination, and retaliation. All right, some keys, right? Appropriately respond to all complaints. So as a supervisor or a manager, you're charged with the responsibility of being attentive to these concerns. Your primary responsibility is to be an active listener, to gather some information, and then report it upstream to either HR or to higher administration, so that the appropriate response can be fashioned, the appropriate investigation can be commenced. Do not, as a supervisor, do your own investigation. There are steps that have to be followed. You can participate or be guided through the investigation and contribute, but it should not be something that's done unilaterally. Monitor for retaliation as a supervisor, and we talked a little bit about the ways in which retaliation can be manifested, and facilitate an interactive process with employees who may need to request an accommodation either for disability, pregnancy, or religious purposes. And that's pretty squarely, something to be worked out with the Human Resources Department. As far as staff are concerned, again, how do you prevent discrimination, harassment, and retaliation? It's through active reporting, right? It's if requested to participate in interviews, comply fully and truthfully. If, as an employee, you see behavior that maybe fits within the description of retaliation, to make sure that that's shared with frontline management. And if for any reason not comfortable reporting it to frontline management, report it either through the HR office, Chief Operating Officer, or through a lead physician at your location. Doctors have been in service on this information, and they understand their responsibilities to facilitate our approach to creating an environment that's mutually respectful. And if there's any questions, there's going to be a Q&A process at the end, and we'll be happy to take any questions and give any further clarification.
Okay, so what is harassment? Harassment is just not about sexual harassment. There can be discrimination that is directed at an employee due to any protected characteristics. Harassments include offensive behavior based on stereotypes about a protected class and behavior that is intended to cause discomfort or humiliation because of the protected characteristic. Harassment also includes any expressions of contempt or hatred of a group which is a victim belongs based on a protected characteristic. So we take a zero tolerance in spectrum, vision management. Harassment conducts will violate our policy even if it does not rise to unlawful conduct. Any harassing behavior will be investigated and disciplinary actions will be taken as appropriate. And these disciplinary actions can include termination. So the definition of sexual harassment, it's unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, and other verbal or physical conduct of sexual nature constitutes a sexual harassment when submissions to such conduct is made there with or without intention, submissions to or rejections of such conduct by individuals used on basis for employment decisions. Such conduct has the purpose or effect of an individual's work performance or imitating hostile work environment. Quid pro quo. So person in authority, someone who can affect the terms and conditions of employment. Conditions can be with or without intention of the employment upon submissions to a sexual advance or sexual favor or conduct. So on your right-hand side of the presentation, there is a Q&A box. I'll be asking various questions. If you could please type your questions, I'll give you a couple seconds to think about it, and then we will move forward. So, sexual harassment is prohibited by the company only where there is a demand for sexual favors, accompanied by a threat of demotion or discharge by the employee's supervisor. Is this true or false? So the answer is false. Okay, so what are the types of hostile work environment harassment? They're unwelcome, based on sex, severe, pervasive, offensive physical, verbal, or visual conduct, interferes with the ability to work, or creates an offensive, imitating, or hostile work environment. Okay, so next question. Tom uses the terms honey and sweetie when referring to a female coworker. When one of the women complains about the conduct, Tom tells his supervisor he has used these terms for years and means no harm. Tom has not violated the company's sexual harassment policy because he did not intend to offend his coworkers. Is this true or false? Okay, so this is false. So some examples that could relate to the question is suggestive or lewd remarks, unwanted hugs, touching, kisses, groping, repeated requests for dates, requests for sexual favors, sexually explicit texts, emails, cartoons, jokes, or objects, inquiring about into personal lives, discussing sex life, whistling, catcalls, comments on clothing, body parts, staring, leering, winking, suggestive looks. So another question, a different scenario. Female employees asked every 2 to 3 weeks by a male coworker to go out for drinks after work. The female employee has always politely declined with phrases such as not today or maybe next time, and similar refusals. She has not formally reported her coworker's conduct. Does this cause any problem? So this can cause a problem. It can be persuasive or disparaging remarks or conduct that is based upon any protected category can also create a hostile work environment, including but not limited to age, disability, sexual orientation, religion, national origin, pregnancy, and etc. So another scenario, Steve and John engage in practical jokes and a sexual banter at work. Until recently, no one complained about their conduct. Many employees joined in the fun, including Sharon. Yesterday, however, Sharon complained to her manager that she was offended and has been for a while. Even though Sharon participated in the conduct, she can claim the conduct became unwelcome. Is this true or false? Okay, so this is true because there are different sex stereotyping. This occurs when conduct or personality traits are considered inappropriate simply because they may not conform to other people's ideas or perceptions about how either sex should act or look. Harassing someone because the person does not conform to gender stereotypes as to appropriate look, speech, personality, or lifestyle is prohibited.
So who can be a harasser? Managers and supervisors, executives and coworkers, of course, clients or customers, even you. However, it's important to remember that vendors, members of the public, or men and women can be harassers as well. We have an obligation to protect our employees from this kind of behavior. So let's review a scenario. The local delivery driver comes into the office at least every other day with deliveries. The receptionist often assists with the driver with bringing in packages. At the end of the year, the driver thanks the receptionist with an edible arrangement. Later in the year, while making a delivery, the driver asks the receptionist to lunch. Any problem with this? It depends. Yes, that's a vendor, and that can be someone who is a harasser. However, if the behavior is welcome, it would not be considered harassment. If it is unwelcome, then she should report it, and we have an obligation to protect her from that kind of behavior. So where can harassment occur? Harassment can occur at work or anywhere while working, at work-related functions and company-sponsored social events, even if off-premise, at private sites and off-duty, such as after-work drinks. It can really just occur anywhere. Under the New York State human rights law, there's individual liability and aiding and abetting liability. Coverage under the New York City human rights law is very broad. Individual liability, aiding and abetting liability. There is strict liability for the conduct of supervisors. Two managers, Susan and Linda, invite several employees who work for them out to dinner to discuss next year's departmental goals. After a few rounds of drinks, they began recounting their sex lives while in college. The newest member of the department, Tom, joins the discussion but feels uncomfortable. The next day, Tom mentions the incident to Karen, his supervisor. Because the incident occurred after hours and away from work site, it would be improper for Karen to take any action. Is this true or false? This would be considered false. It's important to remember that in general, if someone's uncomfortable with the situation, it would be considered sexual harassment. Harassment that does not violate the law but is disrespectful or unprofessional may still violate our company's policies. One minor remark or inappropriate joke may not violate the law but could violate company policy. So again, another scenario, true or false. An employee who witnesses harassment but did not actually experience the harassment should encourage the victim to report the conduct but should not report it him or herself. This is false. As a bystander, you have a duty to report. You may be held accountable for your failure to report an incident. Some strategies for in-the-moment and post-incident behavior is recognizing and acknowledging offenses, interrupting or otherwise intervening in an offense, speaking up, diffusing the situation, talking to the person perceived to be aggrieved, get help, report it, and do not do it alone. You have a lot of resources, and you should use them for who you can report this to. So another question, true or false, an employee must follow the chain of command when reporting harassment and take it to the supervisor first. No, absolutely not. If you want to report it above your chain of command, you absolutely can. That's what we'll go over who to report to in a moment. It's important to report all incidents of harassment, including conduct you experience, witness, or become aware of. You can do so verbally or use a complaint form. All complaint forms are available under the My Documents section in Paycom. So who do you report to? You can contact Lindsay Ziegler, Director of Human Resources, or Tom Panula, our Chief Operating Officer. Lindsay can be contacted at 516-804-5216, or Tom Panula can be contacted at 516-804-5222. Any other supervisor or manager with whom you are comfortable speaking to, you can report it to as well. And you can submit the claim forms directly to Lindsay Ziegler, Director of Human Resources, at lziegler@spectrumvisionpartners.com.
Responding to complaints. Supervisors are required to report any harassment they observe, have knowledge of, or take a complaint on. An established law is if a supervisor has knowledge, it's considered the knowledge of the employer. And if the supervisor does not act on that knowledge, the employer is still liable. It is not just what you know, but what you should have known. If it is reasonable to consider a supervisor would have been aware of a situation, the company will still be held liable. Supervisors who do not report harassment will be subject to progressive discipline, which can consist of additional training up to and including termination. Intent versus impact. The yardstick to judge inappropriate behavior is not if it offends you, but will it offend another, specifically those of the opposite sex, a different race or religion, etc. Unwelcomeness is determined by the recipient. It is the behavior, not the intent of the person engaging in the behavior. Our goal as an employer is to have our employees comfortable to come to managers, physicians, and administration with concerns, and for them to feel confident that we will support and resolve the situations. It is important we have mutual respect for each other, and employees respect us enough to feel comfortable coming to us first, with a concern before going to an outside agency. So how do you handle a complaint? First, thank the employee for coming to you and reiterate our commitment to a harassment-free workplace. Listen enough to be sensitive to the employee and gather enough information for Human Resources to start an investigation. Assure the employee they are protected against retaliation. If an employee prefers or feels comfortable, they can contact Human Resources directly with any concerns. So handling employee complaints. There's no such thing as an off-the-record complaint. If you receive a complaint, you have an obligation to report to Human Resources, and the employee can be made aware of this. And HR and legal have the obligation to investigate the complaint. Confidentiality will be maintained as much as possible, but there may be a need to share the information with those who have a legitimate need to know. Once Human Resources receives a complaint from the manager or from an employee, generally the first contact for intake is the employee making the complaint. Next, generally the person that is being accused. If the accused validates the accuser's story, there's usually no reason to continue the investigation. However, in cases where it is not validated, Human Resources may interview witnesses. We will try to keep investigations as limited as possible to get a reasonable conclusion and to ensure privacy of all involved. Every step in the investigation, Human Resources reiterates to those involved our non-retaliation policy. So what will Human Resources not do? We will not dismiss the complaint, attempt to explain the conduct, excuse yourself from taking action, agree with the complaint, apologize for the conduct, delay the complaint, forget about the complaint, or fail to ensure the complaint is being investigated. Once the investigation is concluded, appropriate individuals will be notified of the determination and that administrative action has been taken. Confidentiality and off-the-record complaints. Complaints will be kept confidential to the maximum extent possible, but there can be no guarantee of complete confidentiality. There is no such thing as an off-the-record complaint. The most common excuses for inappropriate behavior are below. None of these excuses are valid.
To continue with retaliation, we will not retaliate against an employee who makes a claim of discrimination or harassment or helps someone else to do so, participates in an investigation, otherwise exercise a right, and retaliation is unlawful. The company strictly prohibits any form of retaliation for reporting any incident or situation of discrimination or harassment, pursuing any claims of discrimination or harassment, or otherwise participating or cooperating in any investigations of a complaint of discrimination or harassment. Often an employer prevails on underlying discrimination claims but loses on the retaliation claims. Significant potential liability, including exposure to punitive damages due to emotional nature of claims. Best practice for avoiding retaliation is to get the message out that retaliation will not be tolerated, promptly investigate claims in retaliation and take corrective actions, and document in detail as it happens and accurately. Okay, so here is a scenario. Connor made a complaint against another employee, Mike, for sexual orientation discrimination. Mike is popular and well-liked. Connor's coworkers believe Connor is oversensitive and are upset with him for filing the complaint. They avoid speaking with him and have stopped inviting him to lunch. The coworkers' conduct towards Connor is retaliation. Is this true or false? So in this case, this is true. This is retaliation towards Connor.
One last scenario. Jane and her husband Paul both worked for the company. Jane complained to HR that her manager's sexualized comments made her uncomfortable in the workplace. A couple of weeks after the complaint is made, Jane's manager terminates Paul's employment for no stated reason. True or false, the manager's conduct could be retaliatory. The answer to this is true. It could be. This is why it's important, if we're terminating employees, that we have a record of progressive discipline. If there's a reason to terminate Paul's employment and we have a record of progressive discipline on file for him, then if we do get a claim for retaliation, we have grounds to fight it. However, when we terminate employees without the proper foundation of progressive discipline and are stating no reason at all for the termination, it can be considered retaliatory.
So there are additional forms that you can review should you want to look into further. There's the New York State Division of Human Rights, United States Equal Opportunity, Employment Opportunity Commission, local protections, police. Additional forms is the New York City Commissions on Human Rights, Nassau County Commissions on Human Rights, Suffolk County Human Rights Commission, and this information is also, and for the state of Connecticut, included in the Spectrum Vision Partners Policy Against Sexual Harassment.
Some EEO hypotheticals and recent developments. We're going to review some questions here. Hypothetical number 1. George, a supervisor, frequently loses his temper and yells at his staff, both males and females. Which of the following apply? The answer is B. George is an equal opportunity jerk. If George is not basing his actions on any protected class and is treating everyone equally, although poorly, his conduct is not discriminatory. His conduct could still be subject to discipline, however, because it is still not appropriate conduct for the workplace. Hypothetical number 2. Ella has supervised Mariana for 5 years, and they have enjoyed a good working relationship. When Ella hears from an associate in another program that Mariana is a lesbian and has a female partner, she tells Mariana that she does not support gay marriage because homosexuality is against her religious beliefs. Were Ella's actions inappropriate? Yes. Ella should not have commented on Mariana's personal life. Ella is entitled to her religious beliefs, but she should not comment negatively on another's life based upon them. Hypothetical number 3. Eva, an attractive female employee, dresses provocatively in blouses with plunging necklines, short tight skirts, and high heels. When she walks down the hall, male and sometimes female coworkers frequently stare at her, some whistle while others just shake their heads. Occasionally, Joe silently acts as if he is having a heart attack. Eva has repeatedly told her coworkers that their conduct embarrasses her and has asked them to stop, but without much success. Some of her female coworkers have mentioned that she causes her own problems by the way she dresses. Have these employees engaged in harassment? The answer is yes. If Eva is violating the agency's dress code, her manager should speak with her and send her home whenever she is dressed inappropriately. Eva's coworkers should be counseled about whistling or making other remarks or gestures that are inappropriate, especially since Eva has already asked them to stop. Hypothetical number 4. Roger, a manager, approached his subordinate, Joan, and told her he had a dream about her in which he kissed her. Thereafter, Roger asked Joan to lunch on a number of occasions, and she accepted a few times. Roger later invited Joan to spend a weekend away with him in the Hamptons, but she declined. Roger told Joan that she brought out feelings in him that he had not felt since he was 16 years old. Roger also complimented Joan on her appearance, stating that he liked the way she dressed. Roger gave Joan gifts, including flowers and teddy bears. Joan said that Roger's awkward advances went on for several months. Roger never demanded sexual favors from Joan, nor did he engage in offensive touching or inappropriate language. Has Roger sexually harassed Joan? In this case, it's unclear if the attention was unwelcome. If the interactions made Joan uncomfortable, even if they did not reach the level of legally actionable sexual harassment, they should stop. While not legally impermissible on its face, we recommend against such interactions between supervisors and subordinates because of the unequal power balance and the inherent potential for such claims. So overall, some takeaways and expectations to consider. Monitor your own behavior. Is it respectful? Is it professional? Do not engage in unwelcome sexual or any protected category-based conduct. Understand and reinforce company policies. Report complaints and incidents of harassment to supervisors or human resources as soon as possible. Cooperate with investigations. Violations of the company's EEO and/or discrimination, harassment, and/or retaliation policies will result in discipline up to and including termination. At this time, we'll open up the floor to any questions and provide answers. You can type your questions over on the right hand in the chat box, and we will answer them. If there's any questions you feel you want to ask that you can't, ask here, you can email them directly to the sexual harassment QA at ocli.net email.